Okay, very good. I'm looking forward to this. Daniel, thank you for spending some time with us. Why is MasterCard doing this? Why am I up here? Look, we're at the very forefront of innovation. We're at the very forefront of product development, value propositions, technology, products. We're going to spend a lot of time over the next 45 minutes, about 25 with Dan and about 25 with Mike. I'm really excited. We've been in Canada for 50 years. Still feels like the beginning. Every time I spend time with Daniel, and I've had the honor and privilege of knowing him for a few years, I get really energized, and I'm feeling pretty jazzed to be here. So as we said, the first part of the conversation today with Daniel is going to be about reinventing Canadian everyday banking. I'm excited because I think what I want you all in this room to take away is areas for collaboration, excitement around what's possible. I think if you watched, if you were here for Jeet's presentation from Fathom Foresight earlier, she talked a lot about the evolution of the landscape and the evolution of everything that's going on. Isabel this morning from Desjardins talked a lot about what's going on outside of traditional rails. And I don't know, I'm excited. So with that, Daniel, it's a great pleasure to have you here. Before we jump in, tell us a bit about yourself. Let's familiarize you with everyone here if they don't know you already.
Tough start. So my name is Daniel Eberhard. I'm the CEO and founder of KOHO. Built a few businesses along the way. Kind of my orientation is hopefully just to be useful at scale. That's kind of think about it. Started a business in wind energy, sold that business. Was fortunate to come into a bit of capital when I sold that business, and then as I kind of had money for the first time, I started wondering what to do with it. And what I came to fairly early was like, the financial products that we choose are actually hugely asymmetric and important decisions, meaning it takes just as much work to get into a great financial product as it does a bad one. If you get into a bad one, it's a fact that you will retire with 30 to 50% less wealth. That's like the math. And the way that I think about this, like I care deeply about agency, and if you don't have financial stability, then it's very difficult to have agency. And if you just do the math on being in the wrong financial products, it means that people don't have the agency that they otherwise would. And so my mom was a single mom. I looked at her investment portfolio. She was in all of these products, these high MER mutual funds and some of these other kinds of things. And that was kind of the catalyst for KOHO. And the goal was, can you give everybody a great financial foundation? Can you democratize access to the best financial products? And if you can do that, I think that you can build a very large and important business. Fast forward to today, we still certainly have a lot of work cut out for us, but we've got a couple million accounts. We've raised north of $400 million at this point, and are kind of well into that scale journey. We've also spent a lot of time getting a bank license, which we're in the very late stages of, and kind of going deep on the regulatory stack, and with partnerships with folks like MasterCard as well.
So let's take a moment, audience participation, round of applause for Daniel.
That's kind.
It's important that we celebrate our own, so thank you for that. Let's jump in.
Yeah.
So high level, the way that we're going to structure the next few questions, we're going to work our way down. Macro, lots of stuff. Tariffs,
Yeah.
inflation, evolution, fintech product suite. What's on your mind? What are the things that are driving pressure on KOHO, or what are the things that you're thinking about on a daily basis that are driving the future for you?
Yeah, so I'm very like long Canada. I heard this put well the other day, but like you can be long Canadians and short Canada. And I'm actually long Canada, but I'm a huge fan of Canadians. So I'm very much like believe heavily in prosperity and Canadian prosperity. If you look at the most recent jobs print, so first of all, GDP is off 1.6% year on year. That is like acute, tracked to the tariffs largely. But if you look at the jobs print, unemployment for folks that are under 24 is the lowest it's been since 2000, or the highest it's been since 2006. In fact, if you look at every single age group, unemployment is going the wrong way, not surprisingly, with the exception of old folks who are staying at work longer. So they're actually employment is rising, which is what you don't want to see because they should be retiring. I think kind of the macro commentary that I have is I don't think we've done a great job. I think it's all well and good to say elbows up, but I think if you don't create a prosperous and competitive global economy, then you're shorting your sovereignty a little bit. And I think that we have like real work to do. And I think that that's been exposed by some of these tariffs and some of these other kinds of things which are putting economic pressure on us. That said, KOHO, I think, from a KOHO lens, we're seeing some rising losses, which we expected in this kind of climate. We're also seeing people take on more jobs. Like our data set is interesting, and now that our GMV, which means the amount of money we put through KOHO, is like 0.5% of Canadian GDP. So it's still very small, but it is like stat sig. Yeah. And so when we see like people going back to work, the data set is now big enough to see that. And it's interesting to compare and contrast the two. KOHO, we think, does well in these environments because the first thing that people pay attention to in these environments is their finances, and they start to question the $30 a month bank fee or the MERs that they pay on their assets or any of those kinds of things. And so, yeah, what we are seeing at a macro level is very much echoed into what we are seeing with our data at KOHO in terms of there's some job loss, there's some people who are taking on more jobs, there's some rising loss rates, all that kind of stuff.
Have you had to make any course corrections or changes real time as stuff is coming in? You're being like, I think we should think about what the long-term implications of that would be if I let it slide for another quarter or another month?
No, I mean, so I think we think about it like in the lens in probably two buckets. One is like, what is our responsibility to Canadians right now? And it's not, first of all, we take a very long-term view of our customers, and so if we can be them for them through these kind of periods, I think that that's important to us just winning. Yeah. But we were just talking about this backstage. One of the things that's like deeply underrated in lending is term. Meaning it doesn't really matter what your margins are if it takes you 18 months to understand what your losses are. Yep. And so our loans tend to be 30 to 90 days in nature, and so we can adjust a lot faster. And so as long as you're not asleep at the wheel and you've got padding, which we do, we feel pretty good about it. We'll probably lean into this a little bit, and we are actually leaning into it with some different underwriting models and stuff like that.
Love that. Thank you. So I'm going to turn the page a little bit. Let's learn about the genesis of KOHO. So the value, you talked about your mom, you talked about looking at our portfolio, real practical things that lit a light bulb in your mind. Was there a point at which you looked at a particular pain point? I'm looking at all the fintechs in the room to say, solve something. This is what I'm going to get at in a second. But like, were you solving a pain point, a real problem that you saw? Are you still solving it today?
I hope so. Yeah, so fast forward to where KOHO is today. We have monthly accounts where folks can get good cash back. I'm trying not to make this a KOHO plug, but high saving rates, all that kind of stuff.
It's a good opportunity. Just make it
cool. So there's that part of the bucket. We also have like credit building products to help folks build and improve their credit history, particularly if you're new to country or have need credit repair. And then we have small loans that we lend. Those are like the big businesses, but we also have the lowest remittance rate in the country and a number of other kind of products. Hopefully the problem that we're solving, and we put people in different kind of buckets here, but like a very like trite one would be houses are out of range for most young people in this country, right? And that's on the order of like 8 million Canadians. And if you look at this, you can look at the income to house ratio like 25 years ago was on the order of 5-to-1, which means if you made 50 grand a year, your house price would be 250K. In most major cities today, that's like 13 to 15 to 1. And that's like, so that means that if you make 150 grand a year, the government's going to take a third to 40% of it. And then like, so you just can't, like the math doesn't work. And so the traditional path for folks was I'd go and get a credit card at 22% unsecured, which a lot of people roll over and is like a really actually dangerous product. And then I'd go maybe get an auto loan, and then I'd go get a house, and that was like my path. Now if you look at this, people have a lot higher student debt. Their earning potential is like very different, and they can't afford a house, right? And so the traditional ways of people building credit and that path is just like changing. And you shouldn't, mortgage was the way that a lot of people, or the thing that people aspire to, that has changed. The big thing that we hopefully do, and we'll talk about trust in a minute, I know, is just like it's not to suggest that we don't charge fees, but we always will say like we want to act on your behalf. And the kind of trust generation that we try to operate with is not that we're the biggest or we've been here the longest, but just that the products we bring you will always be great products. And then that way you'll be more likely to buy the second and the third product from us, and we get to play this like longer term game with users.
And how do you ensure that? Do you go out to the customers and say, hey, we're thinking about creating a new value proposition or a new sub-product or something that we're in? How do you ensure that you're actually hitting that note?
Yeah, there's a few ways. I generally think secondary research is like not helpful. Primary research, like surveying, talking to users, is super helpful. Surveys less so, but just like sitting down with a person and be like, does this work? Very often data and anecdotes will disagree, and the anecdotes are often way more useful. But the mechanics of this that we try and do are, in our mind, like, we believe deeply in product velocity. And what that means is we will launch 3 to 5 new products a year, and maybe one of those products will like survive. And so the way that we think about this, we release a new version of the app every week. Every week we ship multiple things. And to use like a sports metaphor, these are all at-bats for us. And so every time we ship something, we try and learn something, and did something get better or worse? And then you get to compound on the value of your winners and hopefully have the product discipline to kill your losers. It's really hard, but yeah, the most important thing is like, we talk to users a lot, and then we build a bunch of stuff, and we go really fast, and then we try and compound on the winners.
I'm going to go off script here because I think this is an interesting conversation, but qual versus quant. So you've got data that comes in, you've got A/B testing that you're doing in the app, you're releasing new products. How much of it is feel? At some point, do you have a layer of feelers in the team who actually go through and be like, yeah, the data's telling this, but. It's
been an interesting arc at KOHO, and we've the team makes fun of me because I've pseudo-banned A/B testing at this point. We are a very data literate organization, but you cannot forget your responsibility to the user. And what do I need a product manager for? And we're not great at product if all we do is throw a bunch of A/B tests over the fence and then put our users through that and then pick sample A over sample B, right? And so what you have to build which is like the hard part in the aspirational place where we're trying to get to, is you are both a very data literate organization, but you also have a ton of quality and taste. And so much of company building process devolves to what can be intellectually defended. And it's really hard to defend taste, and it's really hard to defend craft. And so you need these cultural pillars in your organization to be like, hang on, I don't care that this is a bad experience, right? And part of that, Shopify does this really well. If you just measure for retention or incentivize for lifetime value, or you tend to get to a better place quantitatively. But I actually think the qual is more important. We've been on a journey.
Ooh, that's a takeaway for all the fintechs in the room. Thank you. Thanks, Daniel. Sure. So we've touched on trust a couple of times. We've kind of weaved it in and out of the conversation. It's the essence of banking in many ways. It's the essence of the differentiator for KOHO in so many ways. How do you ensure that you continue to build on? How have you built the trust you have with your customers? We had someone in the front row who was waving their KOHO card earlier, which was pretty amazing.
Thank you.
But you've built a phenomenal trust. You're continuing to build it. How do you focus on it? Are there pillars that you look at each week or quarter or month?
Yeah. So trust is a big term. So I think, so first of all, we're not trying to be all things to all people. And the 60-year-old who wants to walk into the branch and cash her check, great. That is an important use case. That should be served. It's important that person has a good banking solution. And there are certain people who will index around trust around how long have you been here? Yeah. And how big are you, and how shiny are your towers, and all this kind of stuff. We want to operate.
You can have shiny towers.
Yeah, digital shiny towers. We want to operate from the position of trust that we will bring you great products, so that you don't have to do the mental overhead every time we launch something new, and as we launch a lot of things. That said, there is good leading indicators of trust. NPS is we have an NPS of 70. It's a real thing. App Store ratings we care about a lot, and we look at them all the time. The thing that is tricky with KOHO, and we make no qualms about this, but it's shocking how there's a lot of things in the Canadian banking space that are dated or that break all the time, and it's not anybody's fault. It's just a big and complex system. And the thing that we recognize, which is fine, is that we're often at the lowest common denominator of trust, because we're the flaky new startup. And so whether Interact has an issue or some other bank has an issue, it often lands with us and our users. And so it's so important. It's a big part of the reason we're getting a bank license, because we can't even call ourselves a bank right now for fairly good reasons, but you kind of got to do all this like backward somersault to explain who and what we are. And so eventually it'll be like, yes, they're regulated, they're a bank, they take deposits, OSFI's checked them off. And yeah, it's really important.
Thank you for that. Actually, Jeet, second call out for you, but she had you on her little map of the ecosystem getting a banking license. So I think you're making your presence known and felt. So the next question, we've got just about 10 minutes left, but was going to be linking trust to technology. So, MasterCard, obviously we spend a big chunk of who we are on ensuring that the network trust is there. And then we spend another big chunk of our money on the tech and ensuring whether it's AI and transactions or cybersecurity or fraud or components like that. How do you think about technology as the foundation of or the enabler for the value propositions that you've laid out?
I mean, I think hopefully it's central to what we do. KOHO is just north of 200 people today, and we have a couple million accounts. If you look at us and compare us on like a revenue to FTE basis, we're somewhere, depending on the bank, 2 to 3 times more revenue per employee today. We will never be more than 250 people. And so that is all enabled because of technology, and hopefully the thesis is, assuming that we can continue to bear out and build a quality experience, that if we can do this with 300 people or 250 people, then the cost structure is very different. And then what happens is, like, the fundamental rub is if you make $60,000 a year as an immigrant and you come to Canada, it's very difficult for a bank to make money off you because of their cost structure, right? And so you either don't get very good not that you don't get good service, but oftentimes you don't get good service, or you might get NSFs or other different kinds of things, because that's the only way to incentivize that account. If you have 1/10 the cost structure, then the incentives totally change in terms of how you can bank these clients, the types of products, the type of margin you need to make off these products. And so technology is the thing that fundamentally keeps our costs down, and then keeping our costs down is fundamentally the thing that hopefully lets us build better and better products. Like, I think there's a world in the next 18 months where we will start to increase our cash back and increase our savings rates, particularly as we get a bank license, which will cut our cost of capital by 75% compared to what we pay today, right? So notionally we can these things should all translate into better and better product experiences, because I think the product is the only way we can beat or compete with organizations that are 2 orders of magnitude bigger than us.
I love that. So we've talked about trust, we've talked about tech, we've talked about customer value proposition.
Yep.
We talked about the major pressures that we're facing. I think a good place for you and I to end may be, what's over the horizon? You're a thinker. You're part of Build Canada, and if you haven't had an opportunity to read some of their white papers, they're phenomenal, real thought starters. You're a vocal voice on a number of really important issues in the country. As you look over the horizon, what do you see? What are you thinking about, both from a Canada perspective, but also from a KOHO perspective? Obviously, those two things are interlinked.
Yeah, look, they are. Maybe I'll just one thing to, probably a good reasonable note to leave on is Tyler Cowen wrote this wonderful book called Stubborn Attachments, and in this book, he's a very good economist, and in this book what he says is the outer bound of the GDP curve. So America between 1900 and 2000, so that 100-year period, grew their economy about 4% a year, okay? Had they grown their economy 3% a year, America would have the wealth of Mexico. Okay, so the outer bound of the GDP curve really, really matters. It funds schools, it funds roads, it funds hospitals, it funds research, it funds all of the things that work. Okay, in Canada, we have, and I have 2 young kids, so I care deeply about prosperity in this country. I want them to have the set of opportunities that I have. If nothing changes, that will not be true. Okay, we are at the bottom of the OECD in terms of our productivity. GDP or productivity per capita is flat for a decade. We are going notionally backwards, and certainly backwards compared to a lot of our peers. It's been talked about today. Real-time rail and open banking took a decade, and they're still maybe going to happen. Okay, we're not a little bit off the mark. We're widely off the mark. And so I am, again, very long Canada and very long Canadians, but we have to it's not about KOHO winning or anything else. It's just about like letting market forces work, of which KOHO is one. And we have this issue in telcos, and we have this issues with our doctors, and multiple like regulatory regimes that are going to make us globally not competitive. And so shoehorning this into KOHO, like we've seen great responses. OSFI's been a wonderful partner. I feel really good about our ability to get a bank license and go and compete and all that kind of stuff. But my kind of like knock on the door is we have to get moving as a country and like recognize that without a productive economy, economic sovereignty is like really challenged.
Okay. So with that quasi-positive note, let's say.
Quasi-positive. Sorry, everyone.
Thank you, Daniel, for making the time for everyone here. Thank you for
This was great.
For your candor and for your honesty. We really appreciated having you here. So
Thanks,
thank you so
everybody.
much.
Appreciate it.